Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers. Now, when the news appeared in my YouTube feed last week that Ritchie Blackmore was going to join Deep Purple on stage one last time, I imagine I was taken by surprise as much as most. Most people were. Now, look, I'll be honest with you, this has not been on my wish list. I had long ago accepted that both parties had gone their separate ways, and I was very happy with I was very happy where Deep Purple were. I was happy for Blackmore that he was happy doing what he was doing, if I can put it that way. But yes, for me personally, the music largely that Deep Purple recorded with Steve Morse and latterly with Simon McBride, yeah, I've always enjoyed that, and it's always this enjoyment. I wouldn't say it's been tempered, that's the wrong word, but it's always been within an acceptance that this would not have happened had Blackmore not left the band. But that's not the point. As much as this wasn't particularly on my wish list, with the passing of time and obviously given the historical events as we know them, the prospect was, at the very least, an intriguing one. Now, given the time difference from where the concert took place, I found myself at least getting up hideously early, waiting for those first recordings to appear online. Now, fortunately, modern technology has transformed occasions like this, and most recordings that now are captured on phones are more than acceptable quality, allowing us to form a very clear impression of what actually happened. So that was good. Now, it's absolutely no great surprise that Blackmore joined them for Smoke on the Water. And what I particularly liked about what I saw, I've seen 2 or 3 different sources now, but yeah, what particularly appealed to me was how little fuss was made of it. There was no grand entrance, no huge build-up of an introduction, no elaborate staging, nothing like that. Blackmore simply wandered on stage, plugged in, exchanged a few words with the guys on stage, and then they were off. Okay, Blackmore certainly looked frail. There's absolutely no avoiding this. And, he is now over 80, isn't he? And his health issues are very well documented, so this is hardly surprising. Although I will say I've often thought in the recent years that Ian Gillan has begun to show his age, but standing next to Blackmore, Gillan suddenly looks remarkably sprightly. Okay, Blackmore struck up the opening riff, which was his right, yeah. But I think at some point he noticed by the time of the second verse that Simon McBride was just watching him and encouraged him to join in, which a small gesture perhaps, but for me, a nice one. Now the song itself, excuse me, the song itself largely passed without incident, and really, why shouldn't it? Between them, they probably played Smoke on the Water several thousands of times. A few little things to note. Gillan sang the opening verse, stood with one hand resting on Blackmore's shoulder. And throughout this little exchange, throughout the first verse, there seemed to be a quiet, almost unspoken conversation going on between them, or taking place between them. While the one was trying to play and the other one was trying to sing. They weren't simply performing the song together. It very much appeared as though they were sharing a moment. And of course, whether we like to admit it or not, there was just one part of this song that we were all waiting for, and that is the guitar solo. Okay, did Blackmore look a little tentative? Yes, perhaps. Did he play as he did in 1969 or 1972 or even 1993? Now, of course he didn't. But that is entirely beside the point. The tone was still unmistakably Blackmore. And there were 1 or 2 little flourishes, little phrases, flashes of that instinct, perhaps, where had you closed your eyes, you could almost have convinced yourself that the 50 years had not had never really passed. There was enough there, at least to my ears. It wasn't the best performance, but again, as I say, it was not really the point. And there was one final little piece of mischief during the third verse. Blackmore grabbed Gillan's hand and started using it to strike the guitar strings, which one suspects this particular maneuver had not been well rehearsed. And Gillan looked momentarily a little bemused, but carried on regardless. Little reminder, perhaps, of that infamous Blackmore sense of humor, and that remains intact. And then it was over as quickly as it began. They played for about 7 minutes, six and a half minutes. Now, the occasion did, however, deserve to be acknowledged, and I think Gillan handled this perfectly. The last thing the moment required was some overblown, cretinous, Oscar-style acceptance speech that simply wouldn't have suited either them nor the occasion, and they are British after all. Instead, Blackmore and Gillan exchanged a joke about one getting taller, the other one getting shorter, and then Gillan said exactly what it needed to be said. Without Ritchie Blackmore, the band would probably never have existed, and referred to him as the immortal Ritchie Blackmore. Nothing more needed saying. Now, Blackmore took a small bow, walked off stage, and the show simply continued, Now, so much for the events themselves. It's, what is then one to make of it? Well, as I perhaps already said, if one is being completely objective, the performance itself was a little ragged. But that is so utterly beside the point that I have mentioned it, but it really barely warrants mentioning. After everything that's passed between these individuals over the decades, the public criticism, the mudslinging, the occasional bitterness, and it was genuinely heartening to see that all of that nonsense has apparently been left behind them. And it's, obvious, nobody on that stage has anything left to prove, do they? And they know that, we know that, and nobody here was trying to rewrite history. Nobody was pretending that the past didn't happen. There was a simple acknowledgement between, especially Gillan and Blackmore, but with the whole band. They acknowledged each other, and there was genuine warmth and genuine respect. The smiles, I think, were genuine. There was nothing performative about this event. And that's good for them, not only for the band, but as I've said, for Gillan and Blackmore, whose relationship has been so central to much of Deep Purple's internal conflict and disharmony over the years. Now, okay, obviously, I realize in the grand scheme of things, this is hardly a world-changing event, but for the band, and for those of us who have followed them for going on for decades now, it carried a poignancy that is difficult to deny, and I felt it. I really did. Now, will this happen again? I doubt it, but, one should never say never. But if this does prove to be the final time that they, share a stage together, then I think they judged it perfectly. Excuse me again. Announcing it only 24 hours beforehand was an absolutely inspired choice, whether by accident or by design, I know not. For had it been announced weeks, days even, weeks, months, whatever, in advance, the event would almost certainly have disappeared between endless speculation. Is Blackmore rejoining the band? He'll only play if Gillan agrees to sing Burn. Or, somebody would have said with probably genuine conviction that they'd managed to convince themselves because they'd heard that somebody's cousin's neighbor heard from an insider that they were rehearsing Our Lady. You know how these things get on. And, the bullshit and the speculation would have become more memorable than the performance itself. Instead, they kept it exactly as it needed to be. It was low-key, it was honest, there was nothing manufactured, there was nothing sentimental. No lengthy speeches. No attempts to squeeze every last drop of emotion from the occasion. And as Gillen joked on stage, some local chap had apparently written asking if he could join the band on stage for a jam. And yes, it is exactly somehow in keeping with, I think, their band dynamic and the spirit of the evening. To some greater or lesser extent, words were actually becoming superfluous. And I go back to what I said earlier, that I think Gillen handled this with taste and humor. He said not one word too few, or not one word in excess. I mean, but I suppose, taking a slightly broader view, it is a reminder that time catches up with all of us, is it not? And many of the bands we grew up with are already gone. Others continue still, but inevitably, move closer to the end of their journeys. And perhaps instead of arguing about lineups, debating whether someone can still sing exactly as they did in 1971, or complaining that things aren't exactly what they used to be, we should occasionally stop that and appreciate moments like this while they're still possible. And this really was the end for Blackmore and Deep Purple. This was the final time they would stand on stage together. Well, at least we got it. As I said, I may not have actively wished for it, but I don't actually believe I ever thought it would have happened. But, I'm really glad it did. And I think they did it exactly right. Well, yeah, those are my views. Please feel free, as usual, to like, share, subscribe, all those good things, and to comment. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have your own views on this one. I look forward to reading them. And once again, I thank you very much for your indulgence. I wish you well. And until next time, Maçhonquèrre.